Awesome.
Well, I would like to say, I mean, you guys, honestly, you guys have so little real information to work with, because in the end, it all goes back to what the grower says. He brings it to the dispensary and sells it as a certain strain. And we all know that there's a ton of variance between what it is and what they say it is. And that consistently happens, especially because we're in such a new industry. And so I feel like you guys have a huge variance to deal with, and I would just like to say congratulations to doing it as well as you have.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Because I totally get it.
Yeah, it's a tough one to wrangle. Who knows if you could even wrangle in something
Exactly.
like that.
There's a ton of bias, and there's really no way to trace lineages back because it's been a black market. There's no real grower who just has like all these strains that trace back to Landersons. It's all.
I think that's part of the education of actually letting people honestly know that, though. As much as we try, we don't know everything. We're trying to, what I mean? I think that's the
You can't. Everything was pushed underground.
Have you guys thought about reaching out to like the local growers in the regional areas? So like in your California site, you reach out to the guys who are in the big grows, the name brand flowers in the California site. Like here in Washington, the Fire Brothers, the Stevens Pass Crew, the Solstice, all those guys, and getting those guys on board with your accounts so you can get the true down from seed to harvest from the people who are actually having their hands on the flower. So you can go, oh, Fire Brothers, or Fire Brothers White Dog or whatever, you know exactly what it is because the Fire Brothers told you, and they're the ones with their hands on it, So it's not like, what did we hear about this? Because these are local people. These are people you can be like, hey buddy, let's meet up and talk about it and have a meeting, and then set you guys up a separate account per brand, per region.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This next evolutionary phase of Leafly, we're going to start out in a smaller step where we can provide, you could say like, well, we're calling it like a brand page, if you will, or a section where a breeder could claim their account and verify it, and then they can say whatever they want on there about their products.
That's awesome.
So that's in the works.
Wonderful.
Thanks. Did you?
Well, a couple things. A lot of those big name gardens, I still spot check them all the time. A lot of the names are still incorrect. I mean, there's not one person in this room that doesn't know Blue Dream when you see Blue Dream, right? I can see it in the bag a mile away. And that's because there's an abundance of it. And over time, because we are in the beginning of this thing, every strain that is viable legally should become like Blue Dream or G Kush. We will know what it is. But until that time happens, there's no way to verify it is. So what I'm concerned about is you are the major resource. When I watch the cameras at home for all my stores, I see Leafly up all the time. That's the first thing my receptionists and my bud tenders do is jump on there to reference. We need to find a way to have that integrated into our lobby so people can do their own homework before they even come to the back. And so something that Ed and I and some of the managers have been talking about doing into next month. I need to get a hold of you guys and figure out how we can do this, is maybe setting up either a series of iPads in each lobby or television screens with an on-menu access so people can do the homework during their 5-minute break.
I would love to do that.
Can I take this?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh my God. You actually predicted my next, a comment I was going to ask, because, so I'm Director of Operations for Leafly, and one of the things we're trying to figure out is how to better make Leafly a tool to support the bud tender and the patient in the dispensary. And so this is exactly what we're trying to figure out. And so we'd love to know how you guys are using it actually in there. But the other thing is we're trying to come out with an optimized iPad version that would have what we're thinking right now is you have the menu of the dispensary there so you can link to, and people can easily do that research themselves with a little bit of some FAQ to give them, because we're hearing, and I'd love to hear who's asking or you think would be most interested. What group, is it the people that are just kind of this novices or more experienced folks?
Everybody asks, and so what happens is it slows down our process as a business. I got a full lobby, I got 2 bud tenders, 2 patients, somebody asks a question. If it's at one of our locations on Aurora, the internet's slow. So now they got to log up their point of sale, pull up a web page, and that costs us time. If 20 people in a day do that, that's 20 people we can't serve that don't come in because the wait line is too long. So what it would do in essence is streamline the entire process so that people would have a better roundabout education, and instead of relying on my bud tender for that 10-minute conversation about a strain, they would acclimate themselves to doing it on their own in the lobby before they even go back. And I think it would speed up our process. Logistically, it would make us more money, and we could beta test it.
That would be great.
We can do it quick.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to you afterwards, because, and again, we'd love to know how you guys are using it, and if we can make it better as a tool in there to help your customers.
So, I'm a receptionist. You guys are literally the first website I will go to look up a strain, to research the indica effects, etc. If you guys are accepting constructive criticism on how you can help us, is there currently or will there be in the future some way to, I mean, if you guys don't have anything on the strain I'm looking for, I'm just gonna type it into Google and trust that these, because I don't have very much time, 3 consistent facts of this one strain are going to be true, and then that's what goes on our labels. So I'm trusting that that's true. Is there going to be any way for us to submit to you guys, hey, you don't have this strain, can you do further research for us?
So officially there is already an infrastructure to add the strain, it's just not as transparent as it could be. So the way you have to do it right now is basically writing a journal as if you're writing a review of a strain, but it doesn't go public on the site. So those get saved in our back end, and once a certain number of people have reviewed that strain, it basically gets filtered up for someone to notice and put it on there. But it's definitely good feedback, and it's something we've talked about, finding ways to basically make that more transparent and visible and easily used. So that's super good
You
feedback.
guys are just we trust you guys. We want to go to you guys first. So if you don't have a strain, I mean, it's just then I feel like I don't completely trust my further research on it because you're the person to go to. So if there's a strain I'd like to submit.
That is super fixed.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
I have a question, as far as is it something, or it's,
Just start talking.
oh, sorry.
No, that's you.
Is it, my question is it like you just take a bunch of, I'll be good. Is you take a bunch of reviews and compile them, or are people there actually working with detail and doing anything themselves actively, or is it mostly you're taking information that you get from outside sources and just compiling them and seeing which ones are consistent with each other?
Right now we have crowdsourced data, and then so with our rating system we can see with these critical mass numbers that come up, people rating Blue Dream to be good for whatever ailment. Once you get past a certain number, a big number of reviews, that we correlate numbers that way. So what you see can be.
You find a commonality.
Yeah. What's funny is somebody had mentioned back in maybe it was 2011, they thought of Leafly as the first unofficial clinical trial for strains, just because the way people were rating them and the numbers that were coming up. You couldn't rely on it solely at all, but I mean, it was just an interesting thing to see, so to gauge from.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys had maybe any legitimate I don't know how else to say this, but maybe scientists on staff who could maybe turn all this data into some type of legitimate study on each strain, so then we could actually have some verified, cited data. I mean, you guys are
I'll be
pretty
that
much the
scientist.
only ones. I mean, totally. Wouldn't that be sweet? You guys have access to huge amounts of already crunched data.
Yes.
I mean, that's like a gold mine for somebody who would know what to do.
Yeah.
And doctors for the ailments, like BJ was saying, work with the growers and scientists, like Joey said, and doctors, so we can, all the ailments and all the information is 100% accurate and not just somebody's review. I mean, they
Right.
can say whatever they want to say. And we can't take that by fact and repeat that to our patients. That is negligible on our part,
Sure.
just to give them somebody else's opinion
Sure.
as fact. So that's just,
So I'm saying, you guys. are
we
doing-
really need some facts, and that's how, and some hard evidence of what it is, and especially if you're talking about ailments and whatever,
Yeah.
and
I mean, we know where we can.
Well, as far as where you guys get your reviews from though, have you ever done any kind of targeted market research studies? So you're anybody between the ages of 50 and 70 who have experienced cancer, any specified things, so you could have, an elderly market, you could have people come in, sign up for a slot and actually sit down. With me personally, I do Microsoft user research studies, so I'll go in, Microsoft will have me sit at a computer, and it's about a half hour to 45 minutes long, and I go through and I basically tell them how I feel about their new software that they're about to launch, and what user face I like better and what is more user friendly, and I get to rate it myself, and they pull out specific targeted groups of people. It's females between the ages of 18 and 24 who are into this. And you know, I'm a very specific niche market at that point. And so hitting different niche markets, if you get a market of elderly cancer patients, of younger patients who don't have any medical, you know, ailments that they know of, like, you know, straight off the top of their heads, and targeting these specific groups of people, therefore you get feedback from specific groups of people, and then in those where you can bulk the data where 4 out of 6 cancer patients say that Blue Dream helps with their nausea, you know, then you know that, you know, that's pretty verified, saying 4 cancer patients that are elderly between the ages of 60 and 80, so you're really finding those niche markets, and then you're finding the similarities in those niche markets, and therefore, you know, verifying step by step.
Yes.
I'll take this one. So in our next product, one of the things we're trying to do is an onboarding where you can help, like the idea is help the community grow by you know, identifying what your interests are. So then also we can better provide the user with information that's targeted for them.
Right.
So we'll ask, are you a medical patient? Oh, are you using it for a specific illness? And so we'll be going for trying to get that, and that's something exactly we're trying to go down the line. And then also mark to them saying, hey, you know, you've been working, you may have this illness. Tell us what's working well for you to help, you know, we really want to, in the next generation, it's about the community. And that, you know, this is a place that people can, you know, just by being part of the crowd, add a huge amount of advancement to our knowledge of what product and what strains and what works. So,
Because I would love to work with you as far as getting maybe like cards made, as like, are you interested in doing user research studies? Fill in for a time here, and we could even do it at the cafe. You know, we could have them come into the little room upstairs. It's a very private area. Do a one-on-one interview for like 15 minutes and get the feedback from those people. And I have no problem offering up the space to do that. You know, maybe once a month or something like that. Maybe we could work on getting some niche, because I know a handful of our patients would be so excited to share it because they are really passionate about it, and this is something that, you know, medically helps them. And I have, you know, one girl that comes in who's more than willing to share exactly what works for what. She goes down to the vasovagal level to where some strains will expand the blood vessels in her head and some will constrict them, and how it makes her feel, and she can't have certain strains for this. It'd be really interesting to sit down and pick their brain. And these, I mean, these are people who are working with like oncologists and doctors and people, you know, who are the best at what they do. And it'd be just kind of cool to, you know, pick their brains and get their insight.
You're absolutely right. In terms of like Leafly staff and everything else too, baby steps. I mean, we are going to creep into user research, you know, and focus groups at some point. When, I don't know exactly, but that is another evolutionary step that we know we need to achieve.
And I wanted to throw out, because science is great and it's brought us a lot of, you know, like amazing advancements, but the numbers on things aren't always everything. Like, human experience is a large part of this, and for a lot of people who are relieving symptoms, not necessarily curing anything, like their human experience does count for a lot. And like Dane kind of made a joke, like I'll be the scientist, but I do tell the patients that we are all kind of a part of this human experiment here. And as much information as we can share with each other builds the information knowledge. Like we're really here at that dawn trying to create, like Brian said, once Blue Dream becomes more common, we all know what it is. And like, so, like when I do hear a lot of people saying, well, the science and the legitimacy, like what someone says to you is legitimate. It's a fact to them. And if they have PSD and smoking, you know, or using Blue Dream helps them, that is a real fact. It's not necessarily, he doesn't have a PhD and I don't, but that doesn't mean it's not a valid, you know, piece of information that you can pass on.
Sure, sometimes that's all people need.
Exactly. Right? I know someone else who also is suffering from the same symptoms you have described, and they use this. There's nothing wrong with it not working right away. I mean, I think every patient needs to go through a few things, even with clinical things that doctors have. I've worked for the pharmaceutical companies. It would be great if you could just give someone a pill and it works, but many cases you're trying many things before you find what works for you. So getting locked into saying, if I don't have the information right now, it's all over. It's kind of like, this thing is a process. It's not, I have facts now that are legitimate now, and if it's not, it's this. It's like, we're all kind of working to discover things as well as take things we know from the past. So I just wanted to kind of share that the science is good, but the human experience is also a good part that we need to remember.
Important too, because I have a garden at home and I kind of rely off of going to different sites and looking at what people have to say about strains, because sometimes it isn't certain. And so, like, in order to find out how, I mean, for example, just the harvesting time, things like that, you have to kind of go to different sources. It's not all going to be exact, but you find consistencies in information. Therefore, on Leafly, for instance, when people are putting reviews, you know, if dispensaries have a deal with Leafly where we encourage people to go and write a review based on the strain that they got that day and how it affected them, maybe what they were trying to counteract. They write about that and you can see through consistency. Some people may have a skewed opinion on it, but you'll be able to see that that's not a consistent review. That was just one person. So I think that is definitely a helpful area if we can look at reviews from people. So.
Yeah.
I think consistency as a professional grower and as someone that really cares about strains, the best growers in the state of Washington right now source their genetics from seed banks, and their reputable seed banks is in seed banks in California and in Colorado and in Amsterdam. And so if you want strain specifics, if you want to actually know where a strain's coming from, if you talk to Brian from the Fire Brothers, he pulls from DNA Genetics and Reserva Privada out of Colorado. That would be excellent marketing for you guys and advertising, as in paid ad space on Leafly. If you were to get DNA Genetics, Attitude Seed Bank, Barney Seed Co., Greenhouse, DNA Genetics, Reserva Privada, that's how you find out where strains come from. Those are the guys that have the actual beans, as in the seeds to all these strains. They got them from legitimate sources. And so if you want legitimacy behind your strains, you go to the source, you go to the seed banks. And so if you guys want to start getting real reviews, you go to attitudeseedbank.com, you go to DNA, you go to Reserva Privada. That's where Solstice gets their flowers, their seeds from. That's where Fire Brothers, that's where Stevens Pass grew. All of our biggest gardeners, they source from the biggest seed banks. And so if you want legitimacy, you got to go to the source.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that's good, and we're gonna write that down. And something that we've been wanting to do is incorporate that more. I think basically the site sort of grew up
And
as
those are
like a
big
user-generated site, and we're reaching a point now that we recognize that there's a large demand to have like the genetics information and the history and like full sections that basically like there's sort of different tiers of users. There's some people who need like a more thorough background, and the site hasn't been optimized for them yet, but we're in the process right now trying to pull this together, so that's really helpful.
Yeah, you guys are in California, you have the Cali Connection. That's one of the biggest seed banks in California, heavily marketed, heavily advertised. You could hook up with them. In Colorado, Reserva Privada and DNA are the biggest names in the Colorado game. In Washington State, we don't have any really big seed companies, but Vancouver Seed Co. just up north in BC, we have a lot of their genetics. Same with TGA, the Green Avengers. You can order their stuff online. TGA is huge, legitimate source material. It comes right from the people that created the strains.
And just to be clear, we are a Seattle company. We're here.
For sure, yeah,
Yeah.
we just don't have a Seattle seed bank. There's not like a Washington State breeder that like consistently puts out genetics. We're all sourcing it from out of state, from
Yeah.
Cali and Colorado and Amsterdam and Canada.
You guys see that changing in the future, where every state, you know, legal
It'd be
state?
so dope to have a Washington seed bank that actually has legitimate Washington strains. I would pay big money to buy their genetics.
That would be a good,
For sure.
good idea.
Yeah.
Another venture?
Yeah. Just like we're seeing now.
So they like distribute their information on
Okay.
Instagram, so they kind of basically like basically form a relation with
Totally.
them.